We saw Siddharth, the markets giving a 1,000-point salute. Very enthused. So you got the netas wondering kaun banega Mukhyamantri, and you got the markets cheering the BJP rally.
Absolutely, and I think there will be more cheer right up till the next general election, Loksabha elections. And I'm reminded of the market response in 2014 and 2019, and this is perhaps pre-Diwali time for the Indian stock markets, given what has happened in the 3 state elections.
Shail, your reading, was this like a one-day 1,000-gun salute, or do you think this is a rally which is now likely to gain some steam?
I think, Rahul, we'll see much better days ahead because a lot of good things are happening on the capital markets, apart from this stunning electoral victory that's come in. So we are already at somewhere like 2,500 on the Nifty, actually 2,700, and possibly 21,000 fairly soon, and 22,000 is also coming, and that's mainly because a lot of money from overseas will now come into especially the blue chips, because they've been underperforming relatively over the last 6 odd months. And that's the reason why you'll see a very, very sharp uptick on the market.
So are you saying, Shail, that basically political stability at the moment, because it's been such a comprehensive victory for the BJP in the Hindi heartland, gives the markets the belief that it's almost inevitable that Mr. Modi will come back for a 3rd time? Is that where the buoyancy is coming from? Where has this sudden buoyancy this morning come from?
So the buoyancy is basically continuity of what the government has been doing over so many years. So if you look at the winners that are in the markets today, of course, they are government PSUs, but it's the infrastructure pack. You know, things that go into making roads, highways, ports. Those are the stocks that have gone up very sharply. So one is continuity. The other fact is that you've seen markets typically discount events 6 months ahead. And what we see it is this is a semi-final. And the fact that the final looks a bit easier now than what it was maybe a couple of months ago.
It's not just political signals, Siddharth, also the fact that GST collections showed a record increase. The GDP numbers for Q2 were much better. The Prime Minister and everybody else mighty enthused by it. So there are lots of dots, and the government's hoping those dots will be joined together before the general elections to paint a rosy picture.
I think the dots are completely joined. If you look at the tenure and the second election of Manmohan Singh, he had virtually no tailwinds, and he had the Bombay attack behind him. If you look at the macro picture and the political economy picture, this is the best tailwind in perhaps 20 years that any government has had. And this is not India shining, mind you. This is very, very solid stuff on the ground.
What's the difference between India shining and now?
Well, because you didn't have grassroots delivery, you didn't have schemes, you didn't have a program which is spending, let's say, 12 lakh crore over the next 5 years on the Anna Yojana, which has just recently been extended by 5 years. If you look at it in terms of the short-term announcements that were just made in the run-up to this calculation, to this election, one calculation suggests that 48,500 crore of additional spending on various welfare schemes has been promised in the run-up to this election, and a bulk of that will now happen in the 4 big states, obviously. The pressure will come from the fiscal side. But I'll tell you one thing very quickly. The whole thing about going back to the old pension scheme, till a week back, even the center was under pressure. The Finance Secretary, Mr. Somnathan's report is going to come soon. I think now that pressure is off. And that's what the markets are also cheering, that Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister, is not under fiscal populistic pressure, Rajdeep.
Let's be clear, there is fiscal populistic pressure in all the states. A lot of announcements have been made. However, challenge me if you want. I think you make the good point about old pension scheme. Because the Congress in Rajasthan was actually saying we'll bring in a legislation to notify the old pension scheme and bring it and benefit people. So are all Congress ruled states. I think they pulled back on that, which is great. You know, having lost, they're going to have hopefully pulled back on that, because it's crazy. The old pension scheme was replaced by the new one by the Congress itself. And then you went back to it, you won Himachal Pradesh, and you thought you could do it in every state. So that's the good news. But to tell me that fiscal populism does not exist in BJP-ruled states or at the center is the worry. When you say all these welfare schemes, you wonder many of these states are hugely in debt. You can't turn around and tell me there's no challenge in Rajasthan or Chhattisgarh or Madhya Pradesh.
I was making the limited point that the center scheme, Prime Minister Modi's schemes, are targeted delivery of subsidies versus free power. There is no free power announcement by the BJP in any state or at the center.
There is free scooty announcements, for example,
there
in
is no
Rajasthan.
free power. Those are small giveaways. The Manmohan Singh government also wanted to give 10 lakh mobile phones. Fact is, they could never come up with a scheme and implementation. Remember that in the run-up to the 2014 election. There is targeted, delivery of money, and I look at the numbers, 12 lakh crore on free food, and that is having a massive impact on nutrition and, women health at the ground. So I would say we have to make this big distinction, but the bulk of the heavy lifting is done. Mr. Modi will go into this general election, the Loksabha election, without having to worry, will OPS do something to me or will the pay commission do? By the way, the next pay commission is to come into effect in 2026. I believe some announcement between now and March, April is definitely likely.
And finally, I was listening to the Markets Today commentary this morning, and the experts you were talking to were saying, "Ab ki baar 23,000 par." In Parliament, they were saying, "Bar Modi Sarkar." So everybody has their own little gig on what they think is going to happen.
I would imagine that you'll see markets definitely at a much higher level than what they are now, and that's simply because there is a huge load of liquidity that's coming into stocks. You'll see a lot of money coming in as far as SIPs are concerned, and more importantly, foreigners who've been net sellers over the last 6 months will now start putting in money simply because Indian markets, even if they're at record highs, are relatively cheaper than what the rest of the world is.
I just have Ashok Upadhyay, our head of research, sending me a message to what you just said. We'll deliberate on old pension scheme after the panel report. Amit Shah, November 24, 2023. Are you telling me that's off the table now? After these election victories, no one is going to talk about the old pension scheme.
Rajdeep, the panel report headed by the finance secretary is expected soon. What it contains, we don't know, just as we don't know who will be the chief ministers. But I am just making the point that the pressure to fight fire with fire isn't there. Of course, Ladli Behna Yojana did play a big role, but there is a quantitative difference between Modi's welfare push and what was being done by the Congress. And now there is room for these two states which have been won from the Congress by the BJP to change tack on the pension scheme.
But we know on good authority from the Prime Minister himself and so many other people, he doesn't like these fiscally responsible schemes.
No, he doesn't like it, I agree.
He may come under duress at times from the party, "Arey duba doge, harwa doge, kya kar rahe ho, aapko kuch karna hai." That may happen, but that's not instinctively what he likes to do quite clearly.
Chhattisgarh, loan waiver, right? 1 minute.
BJP has done no loan waiver so far.
Chhattisgarh announcement before the election was of a farm loan waiver. In fact, it pushed the Congress. The Congress. The Congress.
BJP
But it was in response.
The BJP increased the price of grain.
The BJP increased procurement prices.
Correct.
So they needed to make their own move. My point is, when you look at the schemes in all these states, all political parties in this election announced what are being broadly described as cash handouts.
No.
You're making the distinction between welfare schemes and cash handouts. Am I correct?
And the PM Kisan Nidhi scheme is due for an inflation adjustment.
And by the way, the
6,000 rupees per
Ayushman
year.
insurance amount is likely to be doubled from 5 lakh to 10 lakh crore. There's a long list. And on February 1, Rajdeep, this will be more a full budget than an interim budget. You will see a lot of push on infrastructure. You will see this budget being a continuation because the government, the policy makers, the finance minister, the prime minister are going to approach this budget that ye to ek aur bari hai agle 5 saal.
That's the good news. I think the good news is continuity. I think what the market is rewarding today is, I think the market is convinced Narendra Modi is returning to power in May, and I think they're cheering that.